Tonight, Christian Porter drops his defamation case. The ABC pays legal fees and issues a statement of regret. The virus back in nursing homes, a resident infected, Melbourne COVID cases spike. Emotional scenes as Australian cricket stars leave hotel quarantine. Arrests over the Cenotaph vandalism. 3 young men hand themselves over to police while the damage is repaired. Peak hour chaos, trains stop without warning, the race to get the metro fixed. A united front, New Zealand backs Australia on China. A $600,000 incentive to sell the family home. And it's on in North Queensland. Origin 1 confirmed for Townsville, 2 games for the Blues in enemy territory.
Live from Sydney, 7 News with Mark Ferguson.
Good evening. Former Attorney General Christian Porter has dropped his defamation lawsuit against the ABC over those historical rape allegations with no damages paid. But Mr Porter remains furious at what he calls sensationalist reporting by the national broadcaster, while the ABC is standing by its report.
Christian Porter emerges from backroom negotiations claiming a personal victory against the ABC, an 11th-hour defamation settlement secured.
They have been forced by these proceedings to explicitly state that the accusations that were contained in the article could not be proved to either a civil or criminal standard.
The ABC fell short of an apology over its reports an unnamed cabinet minister brutally raped a teenage girl 30 years ago. She later took her own life after declining to be interviewed by police. Mr Porter revealed himself as the accused minister 3 months ago, always vigorously denying the allegations.
I don't think this article ever should have been printed and published in the way that it was.
Today, the ABC expressing its regret in a statement. The ABC did not intend to suggest that Mr Porter had committed the criminal offences alleged. However, both parties accept that some readers misinterpreted the article as an accusation of guilt against Mr Porter.
There's no turning the clock back once someone writes a sensationalist article like this with allegations that would lead ordinary readers to jump to a conclusion of guilt.
As for compensation, Four Corners executive producer Sally Neighbour says no damages were paid. The journalist under fire, Louise Milligan, also firing back this afternoon. The ABC will pay him no damages. I stand by my journalism.
I will observe the terms of the agreement, which are confidential, but I can say that what Sally Neighbour said was a lie.
The ABC's statement, though, is very public, published on its website, conceding it couldn't prove the allegations to either a criminal or civil standard. Not saying sorry, but admitting regret.
I didn't think, frankly, there was any chance of them making those types of statements to settle this matter.
Both parties claiming victory in a public stoush with no real winner.
That is a humiliating back down for the ABC, no matter what way they want to spin it.
Let's go live to Canberra now. Mark, what does all this mean for Christian Porter's political career?
Well, Mark, he says he will stand at the next election and is determined to revive his career. Once placed among those considered future PM material, of course, but for the time being, he will remain in the industry portfolio. He could, though, be elevated after the next election, which assumes, of course, he wins his seat of Pearce, which is a pretty big assumption. The Liberal name is mud in WA after the state election wipeout. And the big question is how this extraordinary affair plays with voters. There's an obvious and wide binary divide between those who support Mr Porter and those who don't, but it's what those voters in the middle ground think that will be decisive. Now, Scott Morrison was in the air back from New Zealand when the news broke. He's just landed in Canberra a few minutes ago and is expected to speak with Christian Porter later tonight. Mark.
OK, Mark Riley in Canberra. Thank you. Victoria's COVID crisis is deepening with 11 new cases today, including an aged care resident. That has triggered a swift reaction here, our Premier promising help to all aged care workers as soon as possible. Also in Sydney, our star cricketers are now out of quarantine.
An embrace for fast bowler Pat Cummins to signal the end of tough times. First COVID-ravaged India, then quarantine.
And now out of quarantine, I can't wait to get home to see my family.
Steve Smith was among those to join the exodus. David Warner was home before dawn.
Are you cold?
It's tough to be there in that time, but also very relieved to get home.
Unless you are a Victorian cricketer, where home is worse by the day.
We've gone from one case at the beginning of this month to 4,200 primary close contacts.
Today, 11 new cases, and exposure sites now number more than 300. But right now, the concern is where it's happening again.
3 of today's cases relate to the emerging outbreak in our private residential aged care sector.
COVID has breached 2 Melbourne nursing homes with 2 workers and a resident now confirmed positive.
In the past 24 hours, we've identified many more points of concern. There is no doubt that this situation is incredibly serious.
Elderly residents were supposed to have been fully vaccinated by now.
They fly in the face of the government's promises earlier this year.
We've said if you're an aged care worker, even though the federal government was going to do that bit, we're very pleased to accept you to get vaccinated.
Qantas CEO Alan Joyce has had his jab.
And my second shot is in August.
And he's incentivising customers to do the same. Qantas Jetstar is offering a year's unlimited free travel for a family in each state and territory, complemented by 1 million Accor points at 400 hotels and resorts, eligible only for those vaccinated by year's end. There is also an offer of frequent flyer points and discounts.
We're encouraging every other company in the country to try and do something similar.
It's an individual choice, but if there are incentives, great.
Many, of course, incentivise themselves.
I'm doing this for my family.
The federal government says it is closing in on 4.5 million older Australians and frontline healthcare workers to have received at least their first jab, for the most part AstraZeneca. However, the government does anticipate it might be a bit more difficult convincing younger Australians to get the jab. Ad campaigns will roll out from July. Robert Ovadia, 7 News.
And the growing COVID cluster in Melbourne has forced the NRL to move State of Origin 1 to Townsville. Let's go to Chief League reporter Michelle Bishop now, who's at the annual True Blues dinner in Pyrmont. Michelle, how do they feel about playing deep in enemy territory?
Good evening, Mark. Well, New South Wales coach Brad Fittler says he and his players, they're warming to the idea of playing in North Queensland. Now, the NRL, they are adamant that Townsville is the right venue, offering plenty of space for corporate boxes, fans and, of course, top facilities for the players. Crucially, it's as far away as possible from any recent COVID outbreak, limiting any biosecurity risks. Anyone with tickets to the MCG will be refunded, and as a sweetener to Melbourne, an Origin game will be played there in 2024 and 2026.
Everyone understands that we're in a pandemic. Everyone understands that these decisions are not easy, and we have to think about what's best in the best interest of the game.
The fact what's happening in Melbourne at the moment has disturbed things, but it's got nothing to do with the way we prepare for a game of footy.
Now, 5 players in that starting lineup for the Blues are, of course, from the Penrith Panthers, and also 18th man Api Koroisau. Their form this year has just been far too hot to miss, and later in sport we'll hear some of their inspirational stories. Mark.
Looking forward to it, Michelle. Thank you. In breaking news, a man has been killed when a yacht ran aground and crashed into rocks in Sydney South. Police, Marine Rescue and the Westpac helicopter were called to Bundeena this afternoon. The boatie, believed to be in his 70s, was winched from the 8-metre cruiser but could not be saved. 3 young men have been arrested over the weekend. Vandalism of Sydney's Martin Place cenotaph, damage the RSL says is disgusting. They reported to police hours after security video showed a group of 5 climbing onto the memorial early on Saturday morning.
At the memorial